And now let's take a look at Force of Nature Extended. Rising water levels inundated major routes which were already flooded with commuters coming back from the long weekend. Most roads have reopened by this morning. And it's a race against the clock for rescue. Our active weather coverage continues here on the Weather Network. We are taking a look at the risk of storms, unfortunately, almost right across the country, a similar pattern to what we were seeing yesterday. Rachel Schoutsen here with you. And let's take a fly out of Atlantic Canada. We can see some stormy weather approaching Newfoundland and then heading in towards Quebec and Ontario as well. We're sort of seeing the exact same situation through here. So a closer look in towards southern Ontario. This is going to be the problem spot, I'll say. So this is the storms that we're really continuing to monitor. We can see them over Lake Erie right now, and that's looking to be some of the strongest cells. Now we'll take a look, a more zoomed in look at our radar. So again, we can see these potent cells moving through, and yesterday, if you're just tuning in now, Burlington saw some very intense flooding. We're hoping that this is not the case again today. It does look like more of the strong cells are towards Lake Erie and not more towards Lake Ontario, which is good news. Now, we have Mike Arsenault in Burlington, and he's giving us a recap of the situation yesterday. Yes, Mike, you're right. The end, when will it ever come? Take a look at this. Burlington here, the creek's running very fast. And actually, this creek is on Heaton Ave in Burlington. And we can see that sort of flailing in the creek there. That's a broken gas line. So a dangerous situation out through Burlington. I was actually covering that story yesterday. So this is a look at some of the totals. Really depending on where you were, that's where you saw the flooding. Pearson, only 3, and then down in towards Burlington, almost 200 millimeters of rain. That's enough rain for 2 months. Now, unfortunately, the risk of flooding continues on throughout the day. Stay with us here. Our active weather coverage continues. Cheryl Plouffe will be joining us next.
This weather.
Well, we're glad you could join us because there is active weather right across the country. Rachel Schoutsen joining you right now. And we're going to take a little fly from the Atlantic provinces. We can see the storms bubbling up through here in towards Quebec. We're north of Montreal, a touch of activity. But I want to stop it right into southern Ontario because that's really where we are seeing some of the intense storms bubbling up along Lake Erie, making their way over towards Long Point Provincial Park. If we take a closer look in on that, we can see some activity through the Greater Toronto area, but more south, I'm going to say south of Hamilton right now. Now, Burlington is not the spot. We want to see the active weather because this is what happened yesterday. Intense floodings. It's just absolutely incredible. They field. And Mike, you're bringing us updates from Burlington today, and you are standing in basically a pond right now. Yes, that is right, Mike, and we are definitely going to look forward to that story. Thank you for bringing that to us. Now, in terms of the rainfall, it really depended on where you were in terms of how much rain you saw. Pearson International, just 3, and then we head down to Burlington, where we have some reports looking closer to 200 millimeters. So, unfortunately, the risk for storms, it continues today. Like we were showing you on the radar, we are seeing some activity along Lake Erie, and then as well north of the GTA right now with some light showers. We're not seeing too intense storms right now, but they do have the potential. Let's take a look as well as we head a little bit further west, further north as well in towards Winnipeg, where again, we are also seeing the risk of some active weather. We see these squall line through here heading in towards Alberta, and also we have thunderstorm watches in BC. Yes, our active weather coverage, it continues here on the Weather Network all weekend long. We were tracking storms, and now into the work week, yes, we are doing the same. Rachel Schoutsen here with you right now. Let's take a little fly out of the Atlantic provinces. We saw some of those storms this morning. Risk for some non-severe storms in towards New Brunswick today as well. And then as we get into Ontario, this is where we can really see the bulk of the moisture making its way through. So mainly over Lake Erie now, and it looks to be continuing on further southeast, which is good news, off in towards the U.S. Right now, it does look like we could be seeing some rain around the Niagara area, even in towards Hamilton as well. This is a closer look at the radar, and yes, basically London stretching in towards Hamilton, looking like that's where the bulk of the rain is going to be ending up shortly. Now, this is a look at what we've put together here at the Weather Network, the thunderstorm risk non-severe for today. Environment Canada has also issued some watches out of London and in towards Hamilton, watching for for some favorable conditions for storms to develop through here. Now, we saw the storms yesterday, Mike, and I know you are recapping some of it in Burlington right now, and the floods, they were just incredible yesterday.
To you.
Thanks so much, Mike. And yes, I was out yesterday in Burlington, and driving was just an absolute disaster. Take a look at some of these roads. Of course, Beat the Traffic, a great source to help you route your way around the closures. Yesterday, we saw a closure of the QEW, a main route in Burlington. Now, taking a look at some of the totals, almost 200 millimeters of rain. That's enough rain to last about 2 months.
This weather segment has been brought to you by Lay's. Is your sandwich longing for Lay's?
And in towards Nova Scotia. Rachel Schoutsen here with you, and taking a look at the radar right now, we can see earlier this morning we had some storms heading in towards Atlantic Canada. Nathan, that's going to be our focus right now. We are looking at some storms making their way over Lake Erie, but it does seem to be heading more in towards Hamilton, Niagara, and then shifting stateside. Again, a little bit activity through the Greater Toronto area, but nothing like we saw yesterday. An update from Kevin, that's coming up in just a minute here. But let's take a look at our live radar right now. So this is happening. We are taking a look at some cells a little bit stronger. So this could be producing heavy downpours, also seeing the risk of lightning, hail, also a possibility embedded in these storms. And again, this is the non-severe risk today. Environment Canada did issue a watch, and that is stretching from London out in towards Hamilton. So that's sort of the target zone as to where we could be seeing some of the most intense weather today. Now, if you were watching our coverage yesterday, you definitely knew what was happening in Burlington. We did see quite a bit of rain, way too much rain, actually, almost 200 millimeters. That is 2 months worth of rain in just 2 to 3 hours. Kevin has an update right now. And yeah, Burlington definitely saw a terrible situation. Thanks so much for that, Cheryl. And the flash floods were just incredible. I was actually covering this story in Burlington, and I couldn't believe it. And it really depended on where you were. So take a look at this. Pearson, 3 millimeters of rain, and then down in towards Burlington, almost 200 millimeters. And that's why we saw the flash flooding. Now, the risk of storms today, unfortunately, it lingers. And Burlington, yes, you will be seeing some more rain today, but not torrential downpours. Now, let's turn our attention over to Nathan. Well, there's no shortage of content here at the Weather Network. A lot of active weather happening right across our country. Rachel Schoutsen here with you. And let's take a little trip out of Atlantic Canada. We can see the storms firing up just before the lunch hour in towards Newfoundland. A touch of activity as well over parts of Montreal. And then getting into Ontario, this is where we're really seeing, let's say, the weather story for today. Now, looking at this, it looks like some of the strongest cells have now made their way over Lake Erie, and they're heading more towards the Niagara area. Now, it looks like some of the worst of this is over, which is good news. As we take a higher look in towards the Greater Toronto area, some light sprinklings of rain, but nothing like we saw yesterday. Yesterday, it was really a tragedy for Burlington, and Mike Arsenault has more on that right now. Thanks, Mike. And that's what we are looking at on the radar, those storms moving in towards Hamilton and the Niagara region. Now, recapping what Mike was talking about, here's some of the rainfall totals. Almost 200 millimeters of rain in Burlington in just about 2 to 3 hours. That's how much rain they get in about 2 months. So quite a bit through there, and it definitely left people heading home from the cottage, heading home from the long weekend in a disaster. Now, the risk today of seeing those non-severe storms already bubbling up through here, light showers through the GTA, but nothing like we saw yesterday, which is the good news. Now, stay with us here at the Weather Network. Our active weather coverage, it continues. Towards Nova Scotia. Rachel Schoutsen here with you, and taking a look at the radar right now, we can see earlier this morning we had some storms heading in towards Atlantic Canada. Nathan will be joining us in our next segment, so stay with us. And now in towards Ontario, that's going to be our focus right now. We are looking at some storms making their way over Lake Erie, but it does seem to be heading more in towards Hamilton, Niagara, and then shifting stateside. Again, a little bit activity through the Greater Toronto area, but nothing like we saw yesterday. yesterday. An update from Kevin, that's coming up in just a minute here, but let's take a look at our live radar right now. So this is happening. We are taking a look at some cells a little bit stronger, so this could be producing heavy downpours, also seeing the risk of lightning, hail, also a possibility embedded in these storms. And again, this is the non-severe risk today. Environment Canada did issue a watch, and that is stretching from London out in towards Hamilton. So that's sort of the target zone as to where we could be seeing some of the most intense weather today. Now, if you were watching our coverage yesterday, you definitely knew what was happening in Burlington. We did see quite a bit of rain, way too much rain, actually, almost 200 millimeters. That is 2 months worth of rain in just 2 to 3 hours. Kevin has an update right now.